What is going on, my friends out there? My name is Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel. And it seems like this guy Dracula just straight up doesn't get the freaking hint. Every time this guy keeps coming back, we keep knocking him back down into the afterlife. All of a sudden he just resurrects right again and we just knock him right back down to the afterlife and the process repeats itself. It's really annoying, isn't it? I mean, ladies, don't you go through this with some guy that keeps trying to date you and you just knock him back down into the afterlife? Man, I totally empathize with all of you right now. It's crazy. But either way, let's just tackle this game like how we always do and find out what exactly the deal is. This is going to be the next Castlevania game for the GBA that I review on this channel. So is it any good or is it absolutely straight trash? Well, let's find out together. This is Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance.
Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance is the second game in the series made for the Game Boy Advance. It's very similar to Castlevania Symphony of the Night, mainly because Koji Igarashi, the producer of that game and this one, wanted to make a game very similar to Symphony of the Night because it was such a big hit in Japan on the PlayStation. So there's many similarities between both games outside of just the Metroidvania style gameplay. The story of Harmony of Dissonance takes place over 50 years after Juste Belmont ended Dracula's curse in the second Castlevania game for the NES. Because of this, the Belmont clan had a village built around them, and they lived in peace for a time. Simon's grandson, Juste Belmont, grew up with his friends Maxim and Lydie, and one day, Lydie is kidnapped and brought to Dracula's castle, while Maxim is found outside with amnesia. Eventually, the two set off to rescue their friend and face off against Dracula's minions while uncovering a mystery about the castle. Like its predecessors, Harmony of Dissonance has a large area to explore and multiple endings to see based on your progress and actions inside the castle. The interesting part about Harmony of Dissonance, however, is how it blends the modern elements of Castlevania with its iconic roots. This time you're playing as a Belmont with the Vampire Killer Whip, but you're also exploring the castle just like Alucard did back in Symphony of the Night. But is this hybrid of past and present really come together very well? In some places, yes, while in others, not so much.
Now, one of the cool things I can say about Harmony of Dissonance is that it blends a little bit of the characteristics from modern day Castlevania games, stuff like the exploration of the castle, with some of the elements of the older Castlevania games. The idea that you're using a whip, you're playing as a Belmont character, that's pretty damn cool. Although it's a little bit annoying that you're not able to equip other weapons outside of just the whip. In the context of this game, I could look past that, but again, later Castlevania games and even Symphony of the Night, which this game is really heavily kind of inspired by, you're able to equip other weapons besides the whip. You're able to use swords, staves, battle axes, all this other type of stuff. So a little bit, here and there, you're losing out on stuff like that. But again, in the context of this game, it's totally fine. Again, I'm playing as a Belmont, so I can't really complain that much. But what about the story itself? I think that the story is kind of meh, it's kind of very basic, it's not really all that intriguing or it really has that many ramifications for the entire Castlevania timeline. I think that's totally fine, especially since it's taking place so soon after the previous NES Castlevania games, particularly Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. Funny enough, Juste Belmont's design looks very similar to Alucard from Symphony of the Night. Symphony of the Night was really popular in Japan and the Japanese really loved their characters and the looks and designs of them overall, so it's kind of funny to see Koji Igarashi design another character very similar to Alucard in a lot of different ways, even right down to the long white hair. But story aside, let's talk about the gameplay, which I think is a little bit more important with Harmony of Dissonance because of some of the different changes that you get from the older and newer style Castlevania games. And some of the results are pretty good, but some of the other results aren't all that great.
Harmony of Dissonance is more of the Metroidvania style gameplay that you know and love. Again, it's very similar to Symphony of the Night, more so than other entries of the series. You'll explore the castle and whip enemies as you go, with the occasional boss fight that pops up in certain rooms. There's an RPG-like system with equipment and items, exactly like in Symphony of the Night. The difference here, however, is that Juste's abilities stem from using magic and his whip. Juste can use the various sub-weapons that we know and love from throughout the series, but he can also combine them with magic to make them into more powerful attacks. This is cool because it adds a new layer of strategy against some enemies, giving you different sub-weapon attacks depending on the magic that you choose. That aside, however, if there's one thing I could say about the gameplay of Harmony of Dissonance, it's how unbalanced the exploration feels compared to other Castlevania games that I've played. What I mean is that in the beginning of the game you're gathering a ton of power-ups and traversing a lot of ground, but at a certain point you'll get stuck doing a ton of backtracking in order to make a little bit of progress in the story. Castlevania games have always had backtracking before, but this seems a little bit excessive at points. It took me a very long time to get past certain areas when I couldn't figure out what exactly I needed to find in order to move forward. This is made even worse when you can hardly get to fast travel points that are placed around the castle, which are far and few between. Seriously, I found this very annoying, especially after other games felt like they have more options to get around the castle quicker. It became a real bad chore to go from one part of the castle to the other in a long, drawn-out, and boring walk through each area. The dash move that you have can make things go a little bit faster, but that doesn't stop you from having to backtrack a lot, and it sometimes feels like a waste of time.
Now, I love the implementation of the different types of magic you can use in conjunction with the sub-weapons from throughout the legacy games of the Castlevania series. I think that's pretty damn awesome. Utilizing some of the sub-weapons that I've come to know in all these different games and kind of change up some of their effects depending on the magic that I used and combined with them, that was pretty damn cool. I would get like some of these crazy fire attacks with the battle axe and it would have like seeking dragons and stuff. That's pretty awesome and it does a lot of damage, especially against some of the bosses in this game. But man, the exploration and the backtracking in this game also is just a huge bummer. I don't know what happened, they really banged this up. One of my biggest issues is that it just takes so long to backtrack from place to place. In previous games like Symphony of the Night and even Aria of Sorrow, there would be either like, some sort of like fast travel or other little shortcuts I could utilize to get from one side of the castle to the other. And for whatever reason, in Harmony of Dissonance, it doesn't feel like that at all. There was a lot of times when I was recording gameplay for this review and I was just going through the same areas over and over again, trying to figure out what exactly I needed to do or where exactly I needed to go or find some sort of spot that I didn't visit before with some of my new abilities that I gathered prior to that. And just, it was very annoying just trying to figure all that out, especially with the small map that you have, which is a big problem with all these Castlevania games on the GBA. But for here, it just kind of makes all these different types of problems that much more worse. I don't know what Koji Igarashi was really thinking with this. Again, he really was heavily inspired by Symphony of the Night, and that was one of my little criticisms of Symphony of the Night back in my other review. However, I still felt like there was enough fast travel points, there was enough shortcuts, there was enough little things here and there or stuff to keep me busy while I was going from point A to point B, or at least one side of the castle to the other, whenever I needed to progress the story. That might just be my perspective, that might just be my own little nitpick, but I felt like this was the worst type of backtracking I've ever had to do in any of the Castlevania games that I've reviewed on this channel. Outside of that, and outside of like the magic and all the other like sub-weapons and stuff, I really don't have much to say about the RPG system. Again, it's very similar to Symphony of the Night. I really believe, in all honesty, I think it's like copy and pasted in some form or fashion, but it's just very similar to that game, and it's very similar to Aria of Sorrow. So again, you're able to gather all types of like items and like equipment, equip them to yourself, level up every time you defeat enemies and bosses. That's pretty much standard fare for the Castlevania series up to this point. Getting different items for the whip itself, the Vampire Killer Whip, where you could equip like different types of elements and different types of like other abilities that would kind of change up the properties of your whip attacks. That's pretty cool too, but it wasn't enough to really kind of change up the gameplay or really change up a whole bunch of different stuff. Like what it did in Symphony of the Night. Every time you got like a really radically different weapon, instead of a sword you get like brass knuckles, or you get like a mace, or do something that would allow you to use different types of magic. That felt a little bit more dynamic on the PlayStation 1. However, in Harmony of Dissonance, it's not really like that at all. There's also another aspect of the gameplay that I really wanted to touch on and give it its own section, and that's the bosses of this game.
The boss battles in this game are pretty terrible. The fights are very basic the majority of the time, which usually ends up with you staying in one spot and attacking them repeatedly until they die. Some of the fights get a little bit better towards the end, but not enough to make them feel as good or better than what other games have done before. A lot of the bosses end up being forgettable because of this. If you play your cards right against them, you can destroy bosses pretty fast with the right equipment. Although I do have to mention that there is a slight difficulty boost with a few bosses towards the middle part of the game. However, if you've explored the castle enough and collected enough armor and weapon boosts, you won't run into a problem with them at all. As much as I've wanted to like the bosses that were here, these fights just weren't as good as other Castlevania games and could have been a lot better.
I really don't like the boss fights in this game. I feel like they're just very mad, they're very trashy, they're very basic, they're very boring. They're just not as dynamic compared to Symphony of the Night or even Aria of Sorrow or any other Castlevania game for that matter. It's just I'm sitting there just whipping it a couple times right up to the point where it dies, and that happens multiple times throughout the entirety of the game. I do have to say that they do get a little bit better towards the end of the game when you start reaching that finale, especially if you're going for some of the multiple endings, but for the most part, the majority of the game, these boss fights really suck. I don't know, maybe it's just me as someone that's been playing all these games in succession. I just didn't really like the boss fights. I know a lot of people out there might feel a little bit differently, but again, this is just from my perspective, and I think compared to some of the other Castlevania games, even the one that this game is really heavily inspired by, the boss fights are just terrible. They're just very blah. That's the best way I could put it. Even Symphony of the Night had some somewhat crazy looking boss fights and other gimmicks to go along with some of the more generic boss fights in that game, but here, not really feeling it, guys. Not really feeling it at all. But even so, despite all my criticisms of this game, I can always count on one thing about the Castlevania series to really kind of cheer me up and kind of get me hyped up, and that's the music. Of course, they gotta have some banging tracks in this Castlevania game. Am I right? Seriously. Am I right? Wait, what? Wait, what? What the hell?
Out of all the Castlevania games I've played up to now for this channel, this is the first game where I've been supremely disappointed with the soundtrack. It's straight up trash compared to every other game in the series. The music in here seems like a rushed job. Whoever at Konami that was doing the music for the Castlevania series clearly took a day off here. All of the original music for this game is also terrible. I didn't hear any familiar or iconic tracks from past Castlevania games, but if they're in here, I wouldn't be surprised if they sound terrible as well. It's like someone was testing out the GBA sounds and cooked up a weird amalgamation of what they thought would sound like Castlevania music. Another game on the GBA like Aria of Sorrow did a much better job with its own music, so it's disappointing to see this done here. Seriously, the music here is just not good at all. If you really don't believe me, then listen to this music straight from the game. It's really that bad and just completely terrible compared to other Castlevania games. I'm just really not feeling it whatsoever.
I am supremely disappointed with this game, as far as the music is concerned. I mean, seriously, Castlevania games are supposed to have at least one or two good music tracks throughout the entirety of the soundtrack, at least ones that you can really raise up the volume once you hear them. But for whatever reason, in this game, none of the music tracks are any good. There's no iconic music from any of the past Castlevania games, there's no good original tracks, there's not even a good theme for the main hero, Juste Belmont. I mean, seriously, what the hell happened over here? This is the first game that I've played in a while where I had high expectations for the soundtrack and I was just completely disappointed with what we got in here. There's just no good tracks, like even just the main area where you first start out the game. Usually that's supposed to be like the best soundtrack in most Castlevania games, but for whatever reason in Harmony of Dissonance, it's just not good. It's very generic. Like I said beforehand, it just feels like somebody was messing around with the GBA sound system and trying to see what they could actually do with it, but for whatever reason, we just got garbage tracks out of there and it just felt like it was a rushed job just to get a soundtrack in there before the game's released. Again, that's just my opinion on the matter, and I'm pretty sure there's some people out there, like some of you guys watching this now, that might like the soundtrack of Harmony of Dissonance, but for me, what I actually listened to on here, and for what I actually heard throughout the entirety of the game, I was not happy whatsoever. I was just, again, this music is forgettable, this music is trash compared to previous games in the series. I mean, compared to any of the tracks in Aria of Sorrow, like, this game is just utter garbage. It's just meh, just no. Hard nope on all this soundtrack, straight up. But with all that being said, do I still enjoy playing through Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance on the GBA? To be totally honest with you guys, not really. I just don't think it's that great of a Castlevania game compared to other games that have come out in the series. Compared to Aria of Sorrow, compared to Symphony of the Night, which this game is inspired by, or any of the other previous Castlevania games that might be different from this one, Harmony of Dissonance just doesn't really stack up. I love the idea of blending some of the old school with the new school Castlevania stuff. I think that's pretty cool. Being able to use a whip again, being able to play as a Belmont, being able to explore the castle like Alucard did so long ago, that's pretty damn awesome. But the execution in this game on a couple different aspects just completely ruins the experience for me. So there you have it, everyone. Those are my thoughts on Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance. I wish it was better. I wish I felt even more better about this game, but it is what it is. It's just kind of meh compared to some of the other games that I played for the channel thus far. Regardless though, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Tell me, do you like Castlevania Harmony of Dissonance? Do you think some of the other Castlevania games are a little bit better? Or what is your favorite Castlevania game just overall? Just put it in the comment section down below. Curious to see what you guys say there. And of course, don't forget to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos just like this one. I have a ton of reviews, I have a ton of other vlogs, and a bunch of other great podcast episodes I know you guys are gonna love. And don't forget, I am on Patreon. Remember, if you pledge at the $1 level or higher, you get a ton of exclusives over on my Patreon page. There's links in the description box down below. You get a ton of early access to new videos. You get a ton of exclusive podcast episodes and even vlogs that I put up on there. There's a lot of great stuff. You guys definitely need to check it out. Anyway, I will talk to all of you guys again very soon. Peace out and stay epic, everybody.
Thanks for watching this video, everyone. Make sure you guys check out some of these other videos in the boxes after the credits, and don't forget to visit my Patreon page via the annotations for more exclusive content. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well. Peace out, and stay epic, everybody.